Because, you ask how mother and dad got together. Well, it was because my Uncle Lewis, Aunt Ada, who he was still courting then, Aunt Ada introduced, I think they all went out together for something, a dance or something.
So wait, so Lewis and Pawpaw knew each other because they worked together.
Because they worked together.
Ada and Mamaw went to high school together.
Right, and Ada was Lewis's girlfriend, fiance.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's how they met. And I agree, it still seems to be an unlikely pairing, but I think, frankly, they're both horny. And from pictures I've seen of my mother before she got married, she was, as they say here in England, she was a real goer. I don't mean that she was sleeping with people, but she was certainly a flapper. She had the flapper haircut and the flapper dresses and fringes and everything. Even have a picture of her in the backseat of a biplane going up for a barnstorming ride. So she was no shrinking violet. And when my dad asked her to marry him, she told him that yes, but that he would have to agree, because she was a good Catholic, he would have to agree that the children would be raised Catholics. Even then, I think he had an abiding, deep-seated hatred of Catholicism. Not Catholic Catholicism, because he and Lewis were really good friends. They always were. But he couldn't abide Catholicism. And I'm not sure of all the reasons why. But he agreed. And so to get married by the priest, he had to sign a letter saying, committing to raising the children in Catholic, which he did. And again, thus fueling the 100 Years' War that was about to take place.
The orange and the green.
Yep. And they both stuck to their guns on everything. I was raised a Catholic, and it wasn't until probably was about 10 or 11 years old before my father started saying much about his church. In those days, I don't think it was canon law, but in those days, Catholics were expected not to go to church and other churches because it might be an occasion of sin to others, as they put it. So I never went to church with my father until I was probably 12, 13 years old. Never set foot in a Protestant church before then.
But you went to Catholic church every Sunday?
I did. I was baptized as a Catholic with godparents. I did my first communion, which is what you do at about age 7. That was in Shreveport. To be able to take First Communion, you had to be in catechism classes, and that I started getting in trouble there when the Baltimore Catechism, which was then the standard teachings of the church in America, the first line is, "Why did God make you?" And the answer is, "God made me to know Him, to love Him, to serve Him." When the nuns taught us that, I put my hand up. "Sister, is God perfect?" "Well, yes, of course God's perfect, Alton." "Why?" "Well, if God's perfect, why did He need me to know Him and love Him and serve Him?" So they sent me home. But even that would have been, I was about 8 years old, and even then, it absolutely meant nothing whatsoever to me. I had no feeling of anything in church. And so age 12 or so, a couple of things happened that the summer of my probably 13th year. One, of course, is puberty. And sort of a lot of things getting mixed up on my mind, and, having sexual urges. And the first blatant thing about sexuality I remember, and I believe it was that summer of my 13th year, was my father taking me to a striptease show at the Louisiana State Fair, where the stripper had a parrot fly down and take off her clothes. And I don't remember being terribly impressed by the stripper semi-naked body, but boy, that parrot was really something. But obviously I was having sexual thoughts and fantasies, and masturbation, of course, I've often thought back on what my father told me about masturbation. Wonderful. He said, "Now son, you must not play with that thing. You must not masturbate. Because if you do, it's just like a muscle. If you exercise a muscle, it'll get big and women won't like it. Boy, if that were only true. And at the same time, I'd always been a voracious reader, and for several years, I think it was, every summer I won a prize for being the kid in Shreveport who read the most books during the summer. And all the librarians, stop?
No, I'm just we have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. All the librarians knew me, so they would give me free run of everything, including, and they literally did in the Shreveport, Louisiana Public Library in those days. They had closed areas, which were where the naughty books were, or at least the controversial books were. And I found a book about torture. It wasn't really about torture, it was something about the medieval. But that's the first time I saw the word Inquisition. And being a person, I had links in my brain long before they had links on the internet. Inquisition, Catholic Church. Oh, let me go find that. Catholic Church, Inquisition, this. By the end of that summer, I was no Catholic anymore. But I didn't have the courage to say that to my parents at the time. And besides, it was a nice way to get away from the house on Sunday morning. So I kept going on as if I were going to church. But I'd go down to the newsstand and read the books in the newsstand and maybe buy something I could stick in my pocket and hide. Sometimes I went down to the river and just lie down beside the river and read.
So you guys didn't go to church together?
No. My mother went to early Mass usually, and I would always say, well, I'll go to Mass later. Of course, my dad went to his own church, which was 2 or 3 hours, because he did Sunday school as well. And of course, inevitably, I get caught.
Yeah.
And, he wants to go to his church, and there was a big thing about signing a contract to get an allowance. And I said, I don't need an allowance, I got a paper round. But 13, I just said, I'm not going to church anymore. I'm not going to discuss it. I'm not going to argue about it, but I'm not going to church anymore. And I didn't from then on. So why don't we stop it there?
Okay.